Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm here today with Huw Watkins from BIC Innovation, and really pleased to have BIC as one of our sponsors for the upcoming Green Economy Conference, and delighted to be sitting down with Huw to talk about a new initiative that BIC Innovation is launching in partnership with Greener Edge called Trac-C. And I'm really interested to get into this because it sounds like a fantastic service for businesses across Wales to really start tackling their decarbonisation issues. Welcome, Huw. Thank you for joining me today.
Lovely, thank you.
So I suppose I'll ask to begin with for you to just give us a little bit of an intro to, first of all, what you do at BIC, but how this project has come about. Where has Trac-C come from? Why are you launching this new initiative?
Yeah, certainly. So BIC Innovation has been delivering across Wales since 2004, predominantly helping SMEs to grow through innovation, export, developing new strategies, innovation management, etc. And increasingly, what we've noticed is that, well, it's not just us noticing it, everybody's noticing it by now. There is certainly a huge pressure now on companies, as well as obviously local authorities and the public sector more widely across Wales and beyond, of course, to begin to tackle this serious issue of climate change. We see it around us, it's evident in our daily lives. We're seeing warmer years by the year. So we've got to address it. And what we've decided to do is to team up with another consultancy, a like-minded consultancy, sharing the same values and ethos as ourselves, to develop a series of products, services rather, that are geared towards the Welsh SME in particular. Not exclusively, because it's available for any organisation for that matter. And we're noticing that there's quite a lot of demand for this type of service, given what I've just mentioned. And it's born out of realisation, I guess, that companies now need to take responsibility. If they're involved in a supply chain, that supply chain is contributing to carbon emissions, and it needs to be tackled. And it's an area that companies feel fairly exposed in terms of knowledge, time as well to investigate what their baseline emissions are at. So we've decided that we can provide a solution that's geared really for the busy SME and get them to a place where they can then actively measure that emission, put mitigating actions in place, and really drive the reduction of their emissions over the course of time, and hopefully end up in a place where it meets their expectations. Whether that's net zero, whether that's carbon neutrality, whatever it is, whatever the goal is, then we can help them achieve that.
Great. So it sounds like it's about supporting businesses to first understand their impacts, because I think that's quite complicated to begin with. We talk about our carbon footprint, but presumably there's quite a specialist approach to actually measuring and monitoring a business's impact, and then take action to reduce the carbon emissions from a business. But I suppose making it really practical. And you mentioned there that there's that impetus to do this because we're all being asked whenever we're tendering for particularly public sector contracts. We're being asked to do more than just submit a policy, but we need to kind of demonstrate what we're actually doing as businesses. And is this a journey that you guys have been on already at BIC Innovation? Have you taken steps to measure and manage your own emissions?
Absolutely. And it was driven in part by a number of things you mentioned there. We tender for publicly funded programs, and needless to say, there is a requirement now to demonstrate that you have not just got a policy in place, but you've got an action plan to run alongside that policy. So a very detailed decarbonisation plan. And ideally, companies now need to be thinking about publicly demonstrating what that plan includes. It is a complex area, and if I can just mention, the three scopes, scope 1, 2, and 3, in terms of how it's measured. It's all data driven, so you do nothing here unless you've got good quality data, and companies will, I'm sure, have that data at their disposal. There's a bit of an effort required to dig it out, but certainly they will have data on how much they're spending on fuel, how much they're spending on energy, on heating, and usually that's probably the key area in terms of emission creation. So if you break it down, you then are able to tackle the areas which are contributing to the overall carbon emission number, and really delve into the areas that affects your business mostly. In our case, we're a consultancy, so we don't make stuff, but we do travel. We travel to work, we travel to see our clients, and that really is probably, well, there's no doubt about it, it's the main contributor to our emissions. We undertook a carbon emissions survey delivered by our partners now, Greener Edge, as it happens, and realised exactly what we were doing, where we could be implementing some changes. And we're no different to any other business, any knowledge-based business. That's what they're likely to find in terms of their own emissions. It differs for different sectors, of course, different operations, whether you're on single site, multi-site, depending on where you get your power from, how you travel, and then it affects ultimately how you develop policies to tackle some of those issues. I think it's fair to say that we do a lot of our business now online, and if you're not traveling, you're not emitting. Naturally, there is some emissions by working from home, but they're far, far less than what you'd create by traveling to and from work. So it's about, I'm not saying that everybody should be working from home. I'm saying that get the balance right, get benefits of home working and being based in the office, where collaboration and team working is key. So it's about looking at the situation holistically.
Great. And then you can make decisions based on the data. And I suppose you mentioned scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. My understanding is that scope 3 emissions is about looking at your supply chain. I mean, it seems to me much harder to monitor and measure and do anything about that. What's been your experience of trying to manage scope 3 emissions, or if it's not particularly in your own business, advice for others on how to tackle scope 3 emissions?
Well, I think with scope 3, again, it's about choices. It's about looking at who you're working with. Have they got progressive policies themselves? Do they demonstrate a vision, a willingness to address the problem? And there are choices to be made then in terms of working with organisations who have a contribution to make. And I think once you've been able to address maybe scope 1 and 2, and there's an effort required to look at that in itself, because you might not have full control, depending if you're in a rented office, let's say, as opposed to owning one. in a shared facility, perhaps. So there's limitations in terms of what can be achieved. But looking at scope 3 then is by far the biggest chunk, if you want, of your total emissions. It does take time. It's a journey. You won't get there overnight. Let's be clear about that. We have a 2030 target in Wales. That's ambitious, but it's great to have that progressive ambition in place. And what we've got here in Wales is a leadership that is pioneering that transition across the UK. So I think it's having a plan in place. It's about being realistic with what you want to achieve and by when, and getting there gradually by implementing changes that work alongside other practices within your businesses.
It seems to me that it's about influencing your supply chain. And I suppose that's what this is all about. We started off, didn't we, talking about when you're tendering for publicly funded programs, that's an impetus for you as a business to start making those changes. And I suppose it's the same, isn't it, when we start asking those questions of our suppliers and our business partner organizations, that creates the influence, sort of cascades down. But how is it different, Huw, from what people have been talking about for 10 years or more, having an environmental or a sustainability policy in place within your business? We can all tick that box, can't we, when we're filling out tender applications. Is this meaningfully different? Is the tide changing, and are you seeing a greater emphasis on action?
I think we are. As you say, the goalposts have moved since the days of being able to tick a box and say that you've got something that you just might produce when it's needed for compliance in a tender situation. What our journey told us was we were able to focus on the areas that matter the most, but then sort of inconsequential benefits, I suppose, were realized out of that process. It made us think about our own organization and what else could we do to really enhance our commitment to sustainable development. And for us, that resulted in our commitment to become a B Corp organization. So then you begin to combine profit, planet, and people together, and look at it in its entirety. And I think also these days, when we've been faced with a particularly challenging labour market, it does offer you the opportunity to stand out a bit more. And prospective staff these days are looking at employers who do take their commitment to the environment, to sustainability, to energy management seriously, and are making decisions based on those commitments. So it becomes far broader, far wider issue, and there's some real business drivers now in place that allow you to accelerate, if you want, your progression towards decarbonisation. It might mean that you could be improving your processes, reducing costs, improving your reputation amongst your stakeholders, whether they're customers, suppliers, regulators, doesn't matter who they are. It provides you with the opportunity to project a more positive, progressive identity.
That's so important, isn't it, that we can differentiate between those companies that are just kind of greenwashing and those that are actually taking steps and making decisions differently. So tell us a little bit then about how it works, how a business could engage with Trac-C, and what support you're able to offer on that decarbonisation journey.
Sure. So Trac-C is a commercial offer, and we recognise that companies will be at different stages of their thinking. So we've got 4 different packages. We've got a base camp, which is, as you can imagine, the most basic of services. And then it moves on progressively to a Voyager, an Explorer, and a Pioneer. And as you progress on that journey, you get certainly more bang for your buck. So how it works is that companies, who are thinking about committing to a decarbonisation project would get in touch. We would do an EOI, an expression of interest, understand their situation, the size of the company, the operational aspect of it, the goals that they're trying to achieve. And then it's a case of an engineer coming across, mapping out the operation, capturing the key data. And then there's quite a detailed number crunching exercise that goes on using quite sophisticated tools, techniques to develop the overall baseline carbon emission figure. Once that's known, then we can begin to look at the strategy for reducing that with a set of recommendations. Should those recommendations then be of interest to the company involved, then we can support on implementing some of those. So we can bring project managers in, we can help with specifying equipment. A lot of the companies these days, it's quite cost effective to put PV panels on roofs. It's not the only thing that you would do. We would be working with colleagues in Development Bank of Wales, for example, who have got a specific loan to fund some of these investments, and hopefully working with those SMEs then on an annual basis to understand how their interaction with new technologies has allowed them to decrease their carbon emissions, and really also, if it's needed, working to enhance the promotional aspect of it all, the potential marketing that could come out of the intervention. So it's really looking holistically about the whole journey from day one, where you get to measure what you're producing in detail, understanding where those emissions are creating from a scope 1, 2, and 3, and then all the way through to implementing that support.
Fantastic. Really fantastic initiative to actually support some real change. When I talk to businesses, it's clear that knowing where to start with, first of all, measuring our carbon emissions, and then what's going to make a meaningful difference is the challenge that everybody's facing. And then rightly, as you've pointed out, where can we go to get support and funding to actually make those investments and make those changes? And I can see, that it dovetails really brilliantly with what BIC Innovation has been doing for many years, which is then the next stage is innovating new products, new processes to take it all a step further. So I suppose there's a whole ecosystem of support across Wales now for businesses, and it's really just about encouraging companies to take that first step.
Absolutely. And, companies may feel that there are barriers preventing them from taking those first initial steps. And it could be that they're focusing on keeping their business afloat. It might be, there's it could be some firefighting going on. It's quite a challenging environment out there to maintain, business viability in certain circumstances. They might be short of time. They might not have the resources or the expertise internally to dedicate towards this. So it's about recognizing that it is a specialist task that's required here to understand exactly where those emissions are being created, and then get a measure in terms of how much kilograms or tons of CO2 that company is producing in relation to turnover. So you've got a metric in place then that allows you to use in your communications to monitor against that baseline on an annual basis, and to track carbon in the way that allows you to monitor with some degree of confidence in the data.
That's really interesting. And just that single point you've made there about tracking your carbon in relation to your turnover seems to me that we'll be able to move to a much more even playing field then, so we can all compare and contrast, and as our businesses grow we can monitor carbon emissions in relation to that over time. So I can see that how having a kind of thinking partner and the expertise that you've mentioned can really help us move forward on these journeys. And as you say, it's not just about tackling our that tick box exercise. It's not just about tackling carbon emissions. It's a really holistic look at a business and its viability for the future. And for anyone listening to this, and Huw has outlined a lot of the obstacles and barriers that prevent us from taking action and prioritizing the steps to reduce our carbon emissions. Now really is the time. Everybody's talking about it. Wales is on this hugely ambitious journey to achieve net zero carbon over the next few years. The deadline for that may be brought forward even. There's huge ambition in place in Wales. And all of us businesses across Wales, we are effectively the Scope 3 emissions for the public sector and for the government. So there's huge pressure coming down from those organisations. But there's also pressure, isn't there, coming from our customers and our stakeholders and our families and our own consciences in all of this, that we want to take action. So I would encourage anybody listening to consider that this week, when we're coming together for the Green Economy Conference in South West Wales, and organisations like Trac-C will be there to advise you and give you some guidance. This week is perhaps the week to take those initial steps or take your journey to the next level. And it sounds like there's so much support available. And if we all make an effort to reduce our own emissions and up our expertise and learning on all of this, we could be in a very different place in just a few short years' time. Huw, it's exciting. We're really delighted to have you guys involved in the Green Economy Conference. Tell us a bit about what people can expect from you on the day. I expect your whole team will be there ready to talk to businesses and get them started on this journey.
Absolutely, yes. We're really looking forward to it, to the conference as well. We've got some. We've been working hard to make sure that we've got everything ready and in place. There'll be a team of about 7 or 8 of us all together there. So plenty of opportunity to come over to the stand to have detailed conversations about the technical side of it, maybe more perhaps on the commercial side and the uplift that people can gain from such an intervention. And I think there'll be quite a buzz given what I've seen of the other exhibitors as well. So I think with the talks, the opportunity for one-to-one meetings, we'll have a little competition as well on the stand. So anybody entering that and puts themselves in the frame for a reduction in terms of a Trac-C product as a direct result of that. So there's plenty of stuff going on that we can really look forward to, and and hopefully we'll have a really memorable, dynamic and productive day.
Absolutely. Everyone all together, all on one day, all under one roof. I'm really excited and looking forward to seeing you there. And if you're listening, Huw is actually on the panel for the 4 o'clock session on the main conference stage, which is all about decarbonising your business. So make sure you come along to that to hear insight from Huw and others about taking those practical steps forward. But thank you so much, Huw. Thank you for being a sponsor of the Green Economy Conference. We really couldn't do it without the support of organisations like yours. And for everyone listening, make sure you've registered your place, and we'll see you in Swansea Arena on Wednesday, the 22nd of November. Thank you, Huw. Good to talk to you today. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot.